Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us this Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio website, thisweekinamerica.us. Great to have you with us on the program today, talking about the media, something that's fascinating because it's changed so much in the last 5 or 10 years. In fact, a couple of years ago, we had our guest on the program on talking about what was going to happen in the media, talking about how things were dramatically changing. And in fact, they are. Dr. Douglas Ferguson is with us on the program, professor of communications at the College of Charleston. Had the pleasure a number of decades ago, I forgot how many until I actually went back and looked, working with and for Doug at a local television station. Doug, welcome to the program. Great to have you back with us.
Thanks.
You know, it's interesting because you've talked about the growing irrelevancy of broadcast television, and we're actually seeing that now. When you look every week at the ratings and you see how strong cable ratings are and how weak some of the broadcast ratings are, we've really seen a power shift in the last few years, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. I think cable now is around 60% of the audience in prime time, and the networks are 32% or 34%. I never thought I'd see the day when the combined networks would their share would go down so much.
Well, it used to be, back in the good old days when you had basically the 3 networks, even before Fox came on, that series were shooting for a 40, and if you got a 40 share, you were on top of the world. And as you said, sometimes now it's not uncommon for the major networks not to hit a 40 share on a combined basis.
Yes, it's pretty amazing. When I wrote a book years ago, and it's been in several revisions about what's the make or break point for a primetime show. Will it get renewed in the spring? And I remember it was like, well, it has to at least achieve a 14, and it was a 12, and it was a 10, and it was an 8. And I think now it's like a 5 or a 6, is a shoe-in for a percentage of the audience.
Yeah, and when they got down to Leno, it was a 5 they were looking for at 10 o'clock, and they thought that would be sort of the break-even point for that program.
Yeah, but that's kind of a sad situation. It hasn't been resolved yet.
Well, yeah, and let's talk something that you've discussed is the government coming back and saying, okay, you're not using broadcasters, all of this spectrum, we're going to take it back. I saw a headline not that long ago, wireless fixation burdens the airwaves. The phone companies are going crazy. They want more spectrum, more broadband bandwidth, and they're actually really trying to get more of this. And broadcasters may have to give up some, I understand.
Yeah, well, it's still up in the air. Some people say that they're going to have to give up some bandwidth, and then I've read just this week that someone said, well, no, we can do it without taking from the broadcasters. But on just the sake of a principle, it doesn't make any sense to me that the TV broadcasters use all that bandwidth to pump out a signal and it's now fewer than 10% of the homes out there receive their signals over the air. So, as I was growing up, I remember the TV station we worked at, the lights blinking in the sky, and as a little kid thinking, someday I'm going to work in television, and television's the place to be. And I don't know, when you drive by a broadcast tower, why those lights are on or why there's a signal being pumped out. And maybe for radio, but for TV, over 90% of the homes now get their signal from cable or from satellite.
I saw a public service spot that was running with one of the on one of the local TV stations here, and it was from the National Association of Broadcasters saying they're trying to take free over-the-air television away from us. And I'm sure they overstate because that's what they do. They're representing broadcasters. Will we see a time when that will happen? I mean, is that actually a reality?
Well, politically, they can't do that. So the plan all along wasn't to take away free over-the-air broadcasting without replacing it with something equivalent. The plan was, if you've got 9 or 10%, or eventually there'll be 5 or 6% of the homes that rely on over-the-air cable, that the government would subsidize those remaining homes. Say, here's a free satellite dish or free satellite or a cable connection that will just receive the signals that we took away from you. So there's no loss to you. We're just going to take that spectrum and give it to the cell phone people, so that when you don't get all these dropped calls because there's too much demand placed on the broadband.
It's interesting because the broadcasters now are saying, we like to have our own Emmys. We're tired of going in every year with the Emmys, and it's the Mad Men and HBO shows that come out doing well. Is that showing a further divide between cable broadcasters and over-the-air broadcasters?
Yeah, I think the divide started in the back in the 1980s, when it was pretty obvious between the Cable Act of 82 and 84 and 1992 that the cable folks were doing a much better job of lobbying the Congress to make cable more favorable. And cable does have two revenue streams. They've actually got 3 or 4 revenue streams if you count telephone and broadband. But they get money from advertising for sure, and they also get money from subscriptions. So they've got it all over broadcast. And as to whether they have a separate telecast to award the shows, and I'm not really sure that the American public would be able to see through that it's the best of broadcast, which is the best of the shows that we don't watch very much.
And I wonder how many people even make that distinction. They go to a television and watch a program on that television. I wonder if they separate, okay, this is broadcast TV and this is a cable channel.
I think the older people still feel the broadcast cable divide, but the younger people don't. I remember it's been quite a few years ago that one of the cable networks, I forget which one, hired Adam West to come on and do a commercial saying, look, all the good channels are the big numbers, and the channels you don't want to watch much are the small numbers. And I thought at the time, that's kind of the way it is. That I don't think the 25-year-old person really makes a big distinction between local and cable.
You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network, website thisweekinamerica.us. Dr. Douglas Ferguson, our guest on the program, Professor Communications, College of Charleston, talking about the state of media today and how it's changing. Some people have said recently that if I own a broadcast network, why would I even want to have affiliates? Why not just bag the affiliates? Do what you said, we get the 2 revenue streams, set up as a cable channel, and then I can get money from the cable company for carrying our program, and I also get money from advertisers. Will we see maybe, and NBC's going through that change now, going to Comcast. Is that a possibility?
Well, it makes perfect sense, except that I just read that the Comcast CEO, I think, is it Brian Roberts, announced very recently that, no, we're going to we believe in broadcast and we're going to keep everything the way it is. And I thought, it really doesn't make any sense to have affiliates if you can get the signal out there through satellite and cable. I mean, the only reason there were affiliates 50, 60 years ago, or even as recent as now, was because it was the only way to have an intercontinental connection. It was the only way to have a network. It was terrestrial microwave fed, bouncing the affiliates across the country. There were no geostationary satellites up there in orbit. There wasn't a backbone of fiber and cable built across the country. So if you wanted to have network TV, you had to have affiliates. Well, that boat sailed a long time ago, and I'm surprised that we're still limping along with the system.
When you were back station manager, program director, it was a situation where the networks would actually pay the local affiliate to carry their programming, went through a transition where they cut that back, then there was none, and then it's like, okay, we're going to charge you to actually carry our network programming.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this whole drastic change. So if you're watching a local channel and you wonder why some of the people you've grown accustomed to watching aren't there anymore, and you hear about the local station cutting back, that's one of the reasons, because they no longer take in windfall profits from advertising because they had a corner in the market, and take in great money from the networks for being an affiliate. I mean, that paradigm has really changed.
Yes, and I think that another factor that's come into this is that watching television live doesn't mean that much anymore. People have so many different opportunities to watch a show that I've written about what's called the loss of urgency, that if you don't feel like you have to watch it when it's on, then you don't get excited about it. And unless it's live sports, so what if I miss my favorite TV show? I don't have to worry about putting it on TiVo. It'll probably be on Hulu.com or some other way of watching the TV show.
Well, when you look ahead, I mean, on average, we watch about 5 hours of television a day. And what you're saying is very interesting. Where are we going to watch it? Do you see that becoming the trend? Because you've got on-demand on cable, for example. You've got, you can watch programs now on the internet. You record programs. You've got DVDs of programs. Basically, if you want to be, you can program your own television station.
Right. I mean, they're putting TVs in cars. I mean, a live TV, not the DVDs, but having broadcasting to your dashboard, which is really scary. But yes, there are so many opportunities to watch. It diminishes what used to be what drove all the profit was the broadcasters had you. I mean, there was one way to see the show, and it was them, and so the economics worked with news and newspapers. As long as the only way to get your news was by subscribing to your local paper and there was no internet, then the system worked very well. And the newspapers would plow, let's say, the profits from, say, classified advertising into maybe hiring some investigative reporting and winning some awards. Well, once classified advertising went away with things like Craigslist, the newspapers can't make any money either. It's kind of like all the old media are really suffering right now.
Well, and the consumer usually ends up taking it, and that's probably going to be the case here. We hear a lot about retransmission fees and carriage fees, and people don't pay a lot of attention until they go to watch Food Network or HGTV in the greater New York area, for example,
Exactly.
And it's not there anymore. And you look at the solution, it's either going to be probably we're going to pay more to our cable company for programming, or we're not going to be able to see those programs because the cable company is not going to carry those. Where do you see that battle going in the next few years?
Well, I have no idea where that one's going. That's a public relations nightmare when you start. And it's also political too when you start having the cable companies fighting with different channels, and then the government will insert itself into it. God knows what the regulators will consider a fair solution to it. They have to respond to the voters, and so I think the things that have been free for a long time will probably stay free. But it's a slow erosion, is what it is. Over a period of years, people don't really realize that their cable bill went from $5 to $10 to $20 to now it's over $100. It's like the frog in the frying pan. It happens so slowly over a period of time that the consumer doesn't really notice.
Well, and you look at ESPN, and I understand their networks, depending on the cable system, may get like $5 a month in the carriage fees, and you look at Fox Sports, and that's maybe $2.5, somewhere in that category. But you look at somebody that's not a sports fan, that maybe $7-8 of their monthly cable bill is for sports channels they don't even watch. Will we ever see a la carte out there where we can pick and choose the programs we want?
Perhaps. I know that some cable operators think that it won't work, and some cable operators do. So if they can't decide, I'm kind of at a loss to make a prediction. I will say that those people who spout off on blog lists that I sometimes read online will say, "Oh yeah, I don't want to pay for channels I don't watch." Well, a lot of times those people saying that are the ones that want the sports channels. And if they'd sit and think about it, there are a lot of little old ladies out there, mailing in a check every month for that $6 or $7 that's subsidizing the viewing of those expensive sports channels, which go to fund those expensive athletes.
Interesting. So a la carte, that sports guy may be paying $12 a month now for those channels because it's not being underwritten by the lady who's not watching sports.
And he thinks that, well, maybe I will make it up because I'm only watching those two channels, but the economics has to work out to where the income from those channels has to match. Well, it has to exceed the expenses if they're going to make any money. And I don't know if everybody's thought this through, but we will see some trials, in that respect. I think some companies will try to do what they have to. Again, that's also political. The government can regulate whatever they want to.
We've got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about students who are in communication. What are they looking for in the future? Because that's a whole lot different than when you studied communications back in college, even when you started teaching it probably 10, 15 years ago.
Yes, there aren't the number of jobs for young people. Certainly, voice tracking killed a lot of the radio jobs, and now the idea that maybe each network doesn't need one affiliate in every reasonably sized town to get their signal out there is also going to cut back a lot of jobs. When I got out of college, my dream was to work for NBC, and now it's changed. And I've been telling my students, no, you don't want to work for NBC, you want to work for Comcast. And ironically, it's one and the same company now.
It's changed so dramatically, and I wonder, I still get news the old-fashioned way. I pick up a newspaper, I watch the nightly news because that's the way I've done it for years.
News. Okay.
I watched that. Actually, Katie Couric and her ratings have just sort of become stagnant over the last few years, and I like the newscast. But where do your students? Where do they get the news?
They get it on their cell phones. They get it on Facebook, Twitter. I mean, they're pretty well connected, but they don't rely on the nightly news, and they certainly don't rely on newspapers.
Interesting how things have changed so dramatically and continue to change. And the last time you were on, you sort of called what we were going to see over the last couple of years, and that's exactly what we've seen.
Please don't play that back.
That actually you did. So we're going to have you back on, and we got much more we can talk about here. Our guest has been Douglas Ferguson, Professor Douglas Ferguson, Communications Department, College of Charleston. And Doug, great to have you with us back on the program. Much more to talk about in the coming weeks. We'll have you back.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.